Hi everyone, for today's featured ship we're going to be looking at the Oruba from 1889. This ship was built for the Pacific Steam Navigation Company and was originally going to be put on their Liverpool to Valparaiso service, but it was changed over and sent over to the Australia run and operated by the Orient line. Oruba was typical of ships of that era. It's got 4 masts, 2 funnels. The masts may seem excessive, but it's a hangover from the time when ships still had auxiliary sails. Obviously though, by this time, steam engines had proven their reliability, and in time, those number of masts would be reduced. Oruba was the second of 2 practically identical sister ships, and their dimensions were essentially the same. Its first ship was the Oruba, and both that ship and the Oruba had the same vital statistics, which are as follows. The Oruba was 430 feet long, which is a length of roughly 131 meters. A beam of 49 feet, which equates to about 15 meters. They were steel-hulled, 2 decks, and designed to carry 126 first-class passengers, 120 second-class passengers, and 300 third-class passengers. Oruba having a slightly different tonnage of 5,852 tons. During the ship's operation on the Australia run, it had an uneventful career. One highlight was a certain passenger travelling on board the ship incognito. He was formerly of the Austrian monarchy and formerly went by the name of Prince Leopold. However, he had a disagreement with one of the other nobles, and that caused him to essentially be demoted and kicked out of the nobility. Prince Leopold would ultimately set up his own shop and live a quiet life in Vienna. But as he was being moved out of the monarchy, he was undertaking this voyage, and his diaries indicate it was liberating to almost be among the normal people, to behave and act and be a normal passenger as opposed to being, the exalted class of monarchy. In 1908, just before the ship was transferred over to the South America run, ownership of the vessel was moved over to the Royal Mail Steamship Company, and thus 2 of its masts were removed and the funnels were given the Royal Mail's livery of this buff golden colour, which you can see up here. The 2 masts, 2 funneled look gave the ship a more contemporary appearance, and before leaving Australia, this ship had the honour of opening the new Outer Docks for Adelaide, which you can see in this colorized image, showing the great fanfare of the day. Transferring over to the South America run, again it was largely uneventful, except for one disturbing incident where there was a passenger who clearly had issues, and in the middle of the night during one voyage, clearly inebriated, grabbed his pistols and started firing out into the passenger corridors, up into the air, and he had to be physically restrained. And then it turned out that in his cabin he had somehow brought on board firearms and gunpowder that could have destroyed the ship. I think there's more to this story, but there's very little information on this. Once the ship docked, the man was taken away and placed under permanent arrest, clearly not in a healthy state of mind. This ship's relatively calm career came to an end with the outbreak of the First World War. As with many liners, it was called up to duty. But the fate of this ship was quite unique, because the Oruba was one of 14 ships that were converted into fake, pretend battleships. As you can see in this image here, this is based on an actual black and white photo of the conversion. Using a whole lot of paint and wood, the ship's entire exterior was completely redesigned so that it would mimic the look and shape of the battleship HMS Orion. Well, in this image, the ship kind of sits a bit high up and the stern doesn't quite match the battleship. If you were a German U-boat commander peering through your periscope and you saw this ship with waves washing over it, you could be convinced that this was a genuine battleship. And it was an interesting way of disguising vessels, so that if they had claimed to have sunk a battleship, in fact they were only sinking an old liner. The fate of this ship is both known and unknown. After, posing as a fake battleship, it was then taken to Mudros Harbour, which is on one of the Greek islands, which was being used as a staging post for the Gallipoli campaign. And the ship was sunk there to act as a breakwater, so that some of the smaller vessels can have a calm mooring space. This is a colorized photo from the Australian War Memorial showing the wreck half sunk, and some of the bow has already been cut away, potentially to make it easier to get on board or to do work or whatever. But after the war, there is no record of what happened to this. I tried to find reference to the wreck being left on the island, being diveable, whatnot. There is nothing. Chances are the wreck was scrapped after the war for its steel, or potentially it was cut down to the waterline, and then through wind and wave the lower hull was buried in the sand. If anyone knows, I would love to put a full stop to this and have a definitive end to the story of the Oruba. But it was an interesting way for a passenger liner to end its days, pretending to be a battleship. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the Oruba.